going to switch gears a little bit now, and it is difficult to go a day in our business without talking about something connected to U.S. President Donald Trump, and we're going to do that now with our friend Patrick Basham of the Democracy Institute in Washington. And Patrick Basham, one of the things that I noted today is that the president in the White House has essentially said we're going to back off doing any kind of an investigation into allegations of voter impropriety and voter fraud. So what do we make of that?
Well, it's clear that Trump has taken the voter fraud investigation from a high priority item to at least a medium, maybe even a low priority item. And I think there are a couple of reasons for that. One is that although there's quite a bit of circumstantial evidence that voter fraud took place, it's a very difficult thing to prove. And even though he may be convinced he's right, he may have been convinced that he cannot demonstrate that he's correct. And so he doesn't want that problem to linger. Secondly, it's just not a high priority item for his voters. I mean, yes, if you ask them, are they concerned? They'll say, yeah, we're concerned about voter fraud. But they were concerned about jobs and trade and the stuff that got Donald Trump elected. So he doesn't sort of gain a lot from focusing on it. And the third thing is that the optics are really bad. You know, he doesn't want to come off, and some people thought he was starting to come off as something of a sore winner. You know, if you lose, there's not too much to lose, more to lose if you keep on this. You know, you say, look, you know, I was cheated, et cetera, et cetera. But if you've won, people say, well, why do you care? You know, why are we bothering with this? So for all those reasons, it's important that for the Trump administration's success that they move away and start focusing on the things that the people who voted for them and the average American cares far more about.
All right, so is it also possible that this is an extra arrow in his quiver so that when he runs for re-election, he's already got an excuse or a complaint?
Absolutely,
it's built in?
Yeah, I mean, just because he's making it less of a priority doesn't mean that he's forgotten about it or won't turn to it. I think what we'll see happen in the coming, if not weeks, but maybe in the coming months, is that when Jeff Sessions becomes the new Attorney General, this will be something that Jeff Sessions at Justice Department will get into. But they'll probably do it with much less fanfare than Trump would have. And it'll go on a low burn. And if they find something significant, then we'll certainly hear about it. And if they don't, we just won't hear any more about it. But yeah, sure, Trump has established his narrative on this issue. And come 2020 rather, if he runs for re-election, we'll hear more about it.
What do we know for sure about his conversation with the Australian Prime Minister?
Well, the only thing we know for sure is a couple of things. One is that it was a pretty testy conversation. It was a very candid conversation. Donald Trump tends to speak his mind regardless of who he's speaking to, even if it's a close, ally of the United States and someone who he probably hasn't spoken to in that capacity before. And we also know that the Australian Prime Minister, like most of his countrymen and women, don't tend to hold back. They tend to be pretty candid themselves. So we know they had what the diplomats would call a full and frank discussion, to put it euphemistically. And it does appear that Donald Trump did put the phone down on the Australian Prime Minister. Whether he said, if you don't, if you keep saying what you're saying, I'll put the phone down on you, and he eventually did, or he simply slammed the phone down, we don't know for certain. But clearly the call was ended abruptly on Donald Trump's part. And you can either view that as an enormous diplomatic, miscalculation, or view it as sending a very strong signal.
Yeah, depending on how you want to slice that one up. The president has been tweeting. Of course, he's fond of doing that. Sent out tweets today after the attack on the Louvre in Paris, where a man with a machete was shot by police there. Was silent, though, on the shooting in Quebec City. Now, he did call our prime minister to offer condolences, but no public statement from the president. What do we make of that?
I think we make of that Donald Trump is, in this regard at least, going to be something of a politician. The thing that stands out so far is how non-politician he is as president, not just only as a campaigning candidate. But presidents, politicians, they tend to pick and choose their moments to make public denouncements, public declarations. And it obviously would have fit Donald Trump's larger narrative far better if it had been, say, a Muslim Canadian or a Muslim immigrant or refugee to Canada who had attacked a synagogue or a Catholic church or whatever. The fact that it was sort of the flip of that, it's not so much it's unhelpful to his narrative, but it doesn't further his narrative. So I think in that case, he chose, or he was advised, to not go public for once, perhaps for the only time, and rather than to communicate to the Canadian officials, in a more private, and some would say, more appropriate, certainly more diplomatic capacity.
So getting much coverage there, that Quebec City shooting, Patrick, in Washington?
A fair bit of coverage. I mean, the first 24 hours it got quite a lot, as these things do. But it is, it is not. It's a tragic story, but it's not the story with legs that some of these, tragedies have been.
Patrick Basham, our time is short today, but we'll talk again soon. There's not going to be any shortage of conversation material over the next 4 years.
No, there won't.
Patrick Basham is with the Democracy Institute in Washington. He's one of our favorite guests. We love having him on the show. All right, we have a new total to give you.